So here we are, nearly at the end of the year. Now, as always, not much hobby progress on my guild. It's done. I've mostly been working on these ghosts for Trench Crusade, but that's a different video. So, back on subject. As for games, it was only sort of one this month. Probably one of the best Lady Justice games I've ever played. As though there was a bit of unintentional gotchas in there. Mainly by that, I mean, at one point I had the Whiskey Golem buried and I'd been chipping away at him. And I honestly didn't realize he was down to 1 health. So as soon as he popped out near Lady Justice, he just died. Now, I think with Malifaux, it's very easy to get gotchas like that. And it's not a type of gameplay I like. The community around here is generally pretty good for it. And it's one of those ones I don't feel good about. So I didn't notice it to warn him about such a thing. So just something to think about and be aware of in the future. But the main thing I was going to talk about this month is colours. My overall colour schemes for each keyword. Well, the only overarching thing that was meant to be in my guild was only masters have red coats. So let's just jump straight into the exceptions. The big one, of course, being Alan Reed here. Now, I didn't know what sort of else to do with him. I kind of want to redo him to maintain that only masters have red cloaks, but it looks good on the model. And it kind of leads into the pay attention to me kind of gameplay that he's really good at. And that, obviously, Lady Justice 1 going around there, just because she doesn't have a coat. Lucius, I went with the cliche, one has red, one has purple. And Sonya here has the red internal in her cloak. But overall, I think you sort of get the faction theme going among the masters, which at least is something. But moving on to my marshals. Now, the colour scheme here is pretty straightforward. Obviously, we have a set brown for our cloaks and our coffins, as well as the green flames. Now, I did spread around these cactuses on the desert bases to sort of balance out that the green appears on most models, to balance it over the overall force. Again, obviously we have exceptions. Obviously, Justice herself doesn't have the brown cloak, and the judge has a black cloak. Not that he sees the table too much anyway. So, lucky for me, I think, unlike a lot of people, we have things like the jury and the lone marshal coming into this colour scheme that actually I think works really well. This is also probably my only guild keyword that currently still stays on the desert bases, which I originally had them all on before the keyword thing, and I started rebasing based on keywords. And so it's also improved since then, obviously with the ease of 3D printers, things like little cacti to decorate bases, it's just much easier to get your hands on. Overall, I think my overall painting style tends to be a little cartoonish, but here I think it all comes together really nicely. Okay, so witch hunters. Now this is probably the keyword I'm missing the most models for, so we'll sort of work with what we got here. The overall theme here is mostly black with red highlights. So we use grey a bit on the witch hunter models to have some alternative colours, and browns when you come to witchling models. The big challenge I suffered with this keyword is how to base them for a long time. I always wanted to do something of the Yellow Room, but it's very hard to find a description of what the Yellow Room actually looks like. So I ended up doing these runic bases, and these are just hand carved into the clay I make the bases out of, and obviously painted to glow. It didn't really come together until I found, of course, all these candles to help bring the thing to life a bit more. Also, one of the other little things I like to do on these kind of things is you'll notice subtle things like on the stalkers, they have 1, 2, and 3 candles respectively, as well as different colours. So if my opponent, say, wanted to secretly note down one of the stalkers, they have a subtle thing to note which one they're going after, and they know which is 1, 2, and 3. Also, the I don't know how well it'll come through in the video, but all the bases are actually based in blue and purple, just cool tones, just to help contrast with the overall keyword. The goal is also to give it a sort of dark dungeon feel, which kind of comes through. Overall, I think you'd need to see it. It's a much larger keyword. I'm missing, as I said, a good chunk of it. I think if it all comes together all up would really change the overall effect. But not really going to pick up new models now. So that brings us to Cavalier. Now this one, I think it's a bit harder to tell what the actual color scheme was. In some of the core models, such as John, Tull, and the Zappers, it sort of comes through, but really the color scheme was meant to be a base uniform color of this olive green with a secondary thing for each different unit. So brown on John Watson here, grey on the Zappers. Originally it was these reddish brown on the Rocketeers, but you can't really see the green on their shirts. The same for the Wool, where he does actually have the green on him. In the small bits of cloth he does have, but it doesn't really show up overall. So as I really like the models, I'm glad how they individually came out. I don't think the joint colour scheme really came together on these ones. As for basing, obviously my concept here is sort of the Battle of London. So we have the cobblestones with rubble and barbed wire and sandbags. And there's a couple, such as the Rocketeers again, where you really don't have to bother basing them. They cover up so much of their base. I don't know why I bothered. Originally, I did intend to just hand sculpt the sandbags, but I wasn't really happy with the results. I ended up buying these ones from Gaming Grass, I believe. A different discussion themselves. Again, also throwing in a subtle diversion, such as with them, you have sandbags, barbed wire, and rubble, so you can determine which one you want to target with various effects. Finally, you have the hex bows. I didn't really try and bring into theme at all. I didn't feel like they sort of belong aesthetically with the rest of the crew, so I was happy just to do them up as the witch hunters and not try and find some form of middle ground for them as I do with some dual keyword models. Again, I'm not quite sure what I would do to unify the models to make them all look like they belong together, other than I think people just know Cavalier because it's one of the newest and terrifying wave of models. So finally, we have Elite Mimic. Now, at its core, the idea here was more shades of grey with red or purple colour pops. Obviously, we did a bit of variation. Was it when they share another faction, or just needed some variety in the overall mix. It also again gives you an opportunity. You can have your red, your purple lawyer. The changelings are also slightly different in that regard. Overall, I think this does a better job of blending all these various models together. There are a few things I think you can really tell that Lucius 1 was the first model I finished. In the future, I might have gone back and probably darkened his cloak up a bit. Or the grey parts of it, that is. As for bases, well, obviously I wanted something slightly different from the rest of Guild. When I look at my overall plans for Guild, there's a lot of grey cobblestone bases. So I didn't want them just on the streets. And I don't know why I didn't really care for doing them sort of indoor on floorboards. Eventually I sort of came across this idea to do sort of flagstones in the Guild courtyard. So we went with this brown motif. Which again, I think makes them all different from the other keywords, but really works together quite well. Now, the partial exception to that was going to be mimics were going to be on these sort of overgrown grey cobblestones. I sort of switched on that I do mean to rebase her eventually to blend her in, because I think it works better when they all match, even though it is a weird two keyword as it were. But that's the plan. That's a general sort of theory and idea on how I went about each keyword and my plans for the color scheme, and roughly how I thought they came out. I look forward. I'll probably do this again next year with the new keywords. But for now, that's me, Captain Steel, signing out.